Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the debut self-titled record from Friends of Hell. Friends of Hell out March 18th on Rise Above. The album has 9 tracks, 40 minutes in length, and they are a doom metal band. This record is very linear from the start, and it never really changes that linear forward motion that it has in its construction. The only thing that changes with this album is the momentum that it gives you. Sometimes you feel like you're moving a little bit faster, sometimes it feels like you're moving a little bit slower. But where you started, where you're going, and how you're going to get there, that stays super consistent from start to finish. This allows the record to feel balanced, to feel cohesive, to feel solid as one. The quality of the album is all about the collective, not necessarily depending on individual songs to carry the load. This gives strength all around to how you're going to perceive, to how you're going to enjoy, to how you're going to digest this record. As far as the sound goes, this is old school doom. And I don't mean that by having some old school elements. No, I mean everything about this album is old school doom. The sound, the atmosphere, the vocals, the production, everything is a blast from the past. And if you grew up listening to bands like Candlemass, if you grew up being a fan of the doom genre, this album definitely deserves a spin. It feels like it was captured in a time warp. It was inside a time capsule recorded 25 years ago, but only now you're getting to listen to it. That's the essence of this album. An album that has a lot of grit, that has some fuzz, that has some grime on it, that feels like it really dragging the listener through, but at the same time infusing some melodic elements in order to make that movement seem a little bit easier to process, easier to digest. Nothing you're going to hear on this album you haven't heard before. Like I said, it's an old school record, and I think you're going to find all of those elements had been done before, and there's not really a reinventing of the wheel with this specific album. Where things might become a little bit different, or perhaps where the band is able to infuse their own DNA into that old school sound, is in how warm the elements are. When you look at the bass, when you look at the drums, when you look at the guitars, all three of them have a lot of warmth of sound. And that warmth makes the album feel heavier. It gives it volume, it gives it thickness, it gives it substance. It's not a heavy record, but it does feel heavy in terms of the weight that it puts on you when you're trying to navigate through it. When you try to embark on this journey, there's certain points of this record where the heaviness feels almost overwhelming. And not necessarily from that traditional sense, but in terms of how it's perceived, the atmosphere that it creates, that warmth of sound really adds to it and makes the album feel bigger all around. Now, the drums on this record are really interesting because they help ground the record, but they also help give some substance to the soundscape itself. And I like the options that they went with. I like the process. I like the tonality of the drums on this record. They're not overpowering at all. They're just another element that sits there in the background that allows the sound to really push itself forward while still feeling like it has a starting point. Now, on the other hand, you have the bass, and I feel like a lot of that warmth that I was talking about earlier, perhaps out of all three elements, the bass is the one that has the most of it. And I don't think you can have an old school doom sounding record without the bass playing a very important role from start to finish. It really pops on this album. You're able to really appreciate it. You're able to tell exactly what it's doing, what it's creating, what it's offering, and having a very positive impact on the experience, on the soundscape, and the atmosphere. I just absolutely love the sound, the feel that the bass gives to every single track on this record. Now, when you have a bass that sounds like that, that pops like that, and you have drums that are sitting in the background, really creating the foundation for the record, the guitars are able to be a little bit more driven, or at least able to have a little bit more of a penetrating sound, and that's exactly what's going to happen here. This record has great guitar sound all around, and a lot of the life that this album has, a lot of the movement or lack of that the album offers, is really dictated by what the guitars are doing, sung in and sung out. There's incredible riffage on this album. It's really a guitar-driven album, and without necessarily having the guitars in your face every single song, it's undeniable the power that they have, is undeniable the force that they give, and it's undeniable the direction that the album has. It's all dependent on what's happening on the guitar sound, and it's all depending on what's happening as far as what the guitars want this album to be like. The substance, the essence of this record is really held by the guitar sound across all 9 songs. Now, the vocals are very consistent. Those old school doom clean vocals that work so well. And when I said earlier that this album had that Candlemass vibe to it, that Candlemass vibe is not just there from a soundscape perspective or even production. Even vocally, this album really matches well to some of those earlier Candlemass records. And I love the vocals on this album because they have that clean approach that makes the album feel slightly more somber, slightly more darker, without necessarily changing the overall atmosphere or the overall feel. The consistency is very connected. This is an album that doesn't really change vocally from song to song. There are some nuances. It's not like every track has the exact same approach, but the overall perception that you have of the album by the time you reach the last song is that the vocals never really change, that the vocals stayed uniform throughout. But that's not really the case. Once you dive deep into this album, you realize that there are some nuances. The level of darkness, how deep you're going to go, changes, not on a track by track basis, but there's definitely certain songs that break the mold as far as the overall vocal performance is concerned. Now, all around, as a debut record, this is a very balanced album. It's a record that gives you exactly the same thing, the same emotion, the same feel, the same experience, song in and song out. While I enjoy that consistency, why I like that overall feel of a linear approach throughout the entire record, at the same time the album doesn't really have something that breaks it apart. Outside of that warmth of sound, there's really nothing else that separates this record from any other old school doom record. And I'm not sure if that in the long term is really going to be a winning formula. You have to create a sound that has something specific to yourself, or at least that allows you to separate you from the rest of the pack. This album, while being super consistent, while being well crafted, very strong from start to finish, it's not an album that really sets itself apart across any of the individual parameters. And that may hurt the overall playability of the record down the line. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with Out With the Wolves. This is the opening track. Great riffage on this song. Is a grimy, gritty, a sound that has a super warm presence to it. Almost fuzzy at times in terms of how it comes across, in terms of how you perceive it, in terms of how it feels. Great bass on this song. This track really has a very nice bass sound to it. The verses are more direct. The chorus is a little bit more melodic. A track that has vocal consistency as well, and that adds to the overall experience of the track. The guitars add life, the guitars add energy, and the guitars change the movement, not the direction, but the movement that the song has from start to finish. A great guitar driven tracks with the necessary vocal performance to keep everything together. Next you have Into My Coffin. This is a more driven track. This is a track that feels like it has more energy. It has a little bit more of a sense of purpose to it. It has a better atmosphere as well. The vocals on this song feel and sound different. They're more somber, they're deeper, they have a little bit more darkness to it. Also adding some vocal layers to how this track is put together. It allows the vocals to change the dynamic. It allows the vocals to feel different, sound different, but not really changing necessarily the vocal tone or the vocal approach. It just feels like there's more depth, there's more texture, there's more substance to the overall vocal performance. And I like that change because you're creating something that feels different, but you're not really changing that much as far as the overall approach and how this song connects with the rest of the record. But definitely a song that has more movement, that has a stronger atmosphere, that has a darker atmosphere, that feels more dynamic vocally because of those layers, because of those backing vocals, and overall makes the track feel heavier because there's just more texture, there's just more volume all around. Nothing is thin, nothing is simple. Everything is super compact, layered, and then pressed against each other, allowing this track to feel, like I said, heavier. Last but not least, Friends of Hell. The great thing about this track is that it defines the band and it defines the album. If you were to listen to one song and you want to get an idea of what this record is all about and you want to get an idea of what this band is all about, you listen to this song. This song represents the album, it represents the band. It's all about the guitar riffs, it's all about the heaviness of those riffs, the movement or the lack of movement that those riffs have. It drags the listener through. It's a song that has a great chorus. The chorus has a little bit more energy, it has a little bit more melody, but it doesn't break the mold of how you perceive the entire track. The entire song still has this feeling of dragging the listener through with very slow movement to it. Perfect definition for the album, perfect definition for the band. Self-titled song for a self-titled record. This is it. Friends of Hell, self-titled album, out March 18th on Rise Above. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.